Hi, welcome to Color Speak. It's Janet Huxley, JM Huxley, and I'm here today with my two new friends, Gary and Kim Elliot, and they have an amazing story to share with you. And no matter where you are on your walk in life, what they have to say today in terms of the way that we may have the privilege and the honor of allowing the Holy Spirit to guide us is going to be poignant to you. I'm so excited because they have written a number of books, but the one that I have is this one, and it's called Violets in the Snow. And I have not been able to put it down. And I told them ahead of time, I really am only about halfway through, a little less than that, not quite. And I actually, in preparation for this morning, wanted to race through it and finish it, but I'm going to wait and reserve it later, like, fine chocolate and wine. and and just savor it as we go. So, without further ado, I'm just going to have them introduce themselves, both Gary and Kim. Tell us about you.
Thank you, Janet, for having us. Really am excited to do this. We have some similar friends that just kind of those chance meetings we get really excited about, and we know that this is one of those things. So, yep, Kim and Gary, is that your name?
It was this
It
morning.
is, was this morning. Elliot, we're founders of God of the Romantic Presentations, which is at godoftheromantic.com. We committed early in our 20s to follow God in the ways of the romantic that did lead us to one another, much later than we were anticipating. But we knew that was for a purpose to fill us up, to feed a generation, to help turn the moral compass back to the Father's heart to make the match.
It's beautiful. And Gary, I get your sense of humor already reading the book. So I just know you're going to have some wise quips to come back. So, how about you? Do you want to say anything?
Well, it's quite a story. It's something that we lived out, but we never could plan ahead for ourselves. It was just the interruption of God into our lives, individually and eventually together, that this book came out of. And it's a fairy tale. It
Yeah.
really is. It's a fairy tale. And like Kim said, fully agreed that he wants to do this kind of thing, not exactly like us, but he wants to do this kind of thing for everyone that will allow him, excuse me, that will allow him. And so that's our motivation, read the book, enjoy it, hopefully, and put yourself in our place. Find out that he cares about this issue for you as well, for each person who reads. So that's the heart behind it all. A little background, we are originally from Illinois. We've been in Nashville now for 7 years almost.
Mhm.
And that's where we run this from is in Nashville. And we like music, so here we are.
Here we are.
That's awesome. Well, that's how you know all of my friends. I feel like Nashville is one of my cities away from my home city. In-laws, lots of friends, lots of connections there. So that's exciting. I love Nashville, filled with great people. Okay, so before we get into your story, which I am going to actually nudge you, we didn't talk about this ahead of time, not to give anything away, but I feel like when it comes to your story, from having read my way halfway through it, it's not even just giving it away because part of the delight in reading the book that I have is the perspective of each one of you on the journey, alternating chapters or at least segments of the book between the two of you with different perspectives of what was going on at the same time. And kind of having a hint of what the outcome looked like up front. Really, I think the delight is the journey and the ponderings, the musings of a relationship with the Lord, and learning to, like that tension, pulling back, moving forward, allowing Him to orchestrate the dance, sometimes all in, sometimes questioning what the heck he was doing. And so for me, that was the most poignant part of it, was just knowing that wherever you are on your love journey, um, this whether you're married or whether you're still looking for your person, understanding the whole trust part of this and the way the Lord puts everything together, that even in the longest of waits,
Yeah.
out.
Mhm.
So my first question to you is, and then I want to just let you go with whatever you feel comfortable telling us. What do you say to those people who are thinking, well, my heart's longing is to be with someone, and it doesn't look like it's happening, and I've waited, this many years, decades, what have you. Maybe that just means that the Lord just doesn't see me or doesn't want that for me.
Mhm. Yeah. How could he not see you? How could he not be involved when you're a believer? His spirit has moved inside of you. So you're not alone in your longings at all. And he is the one who promised to give you the desires of your heart, meaning he's sharing his desires of his heart with you while you share yours with him. And then the sanctification of those desires result in those prayers. And the prayers are, I want to be with someone. I want the one that you have for me. And I believe that that is the undergirding of all of it is, do you truly believe that he is with you? Do you truly believe that he is all powerful? Do you truly believe that he is all knowing? I put those three things on a post-it note in front of my computer when I work, so that whenever doubt comes up, I have to remember who I am in union with. So for the longing heart, what is needed more than a partner or a spouse is the assurance that he is with them, he is in them, he is for them. He is using everything to work it into a plan for his good, which is much farther beyond a good circumstance. The good of being conformed into the image of Christ. That's the context of that scripture. All of it is working together for a good. So if it takes 10 months or it takes 10 years, what's happening between the question and the longing and the prayer is a development of intimacy that you're not going to get any other time in your life than when you are alone with him.
Hmm.
To add to that would be, I think it's very important to understand that being alone and loneliness are not the same thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
to,
absolutely.
to find your complete delight in Christ, that's what singleness does. That's what it's supposed to do. To
Mhm.
draw you back to him and find your significance and find your identity and who he is. And then as he's doing the same work in the person he's chosen for you at the right time when he brings you together, now you're two whole people that make a great combination. You're not looking like a dry sponge trying to soak someone up to find your significance. It's not it. You're already significant.
Mm.
You already have value. You already have purpose in him. So establish that now. And
Mhm.
during singleness, establish that now, no matter what the circumstance. And like Kim said, that he will bring that person in its right time. So you can rest in that. But the day-to-day thing, you got to find it in Christ.
Mhm.
You have to find it in him.
Yeah, Paul said that the better thing was an undivided devotion unto Christ. So the time of being single is a gift that you get at no other time in your life. And that is why he puts such emphasis on it, not just that you're available to serve, but you're available to be known and to know him. That whole intercoursing, the word, I think it's no, the Hebrew definition of waiting is to intercourse. Intercoursing with the Lord, to wait on the Lord, is to move in and out with his spirit in a knowing manner. You're knowing him, he's knowing you. I think one of the fascinating things for me when I was single is that I was finding out what he already knew about me. And
Mhm.
then the reality that he still loved me in it. He didn't grimace at my weaknesses. He didn't grimace at or condemn me in my lack of faith or believing. He fully expected it to be exposed and was excited to see it, because in those moments is when I would reach for him and we would come to know one another even more. So singleness is a time to be cherished, not despised. a time where the abundant life that's been promised to all believers is to be experienced. Not wait until you're married for an abundant life, but while you're in the waiting is also an abundant life.
Yeah, I absolutely hear what you're saying. And so to unpack all of that is to know Christ first and foremost, because since I have become single, I've talked to my friends about this and I've meant it wholeheartedly. I absolutely want him to be everything, and everything else is just icing on the cake. I do think what I'm hearing you say, which I think is lovely, because I have known people who've said, my heart's desire was to find a mate, but that never happened for me. And now it's too late, or fill in the blank. But what I hear you saying is if you keep him front and center and he is your everything, well then if that is the desire of your heart, well that's the desire of his heart too, because he put it on your heart. And we're supposed to work together. That was the whole design. That was the plan. I mean, I know Paul also talks about what it looks like for those that need to be single, but I think that it's safe to say, wouldn't you, that the majority of us were designed to work in partnership together for him and for his kingdom.
Right. Because you're going to move in and out of those. The marital relationship is a move in and a move out. Hopefully there's decades in between the moving out. I mean, it's supposed to be in the most ideal situation until death parts. Guess what? We're all going to be single again.
Mhm.
And that departure, are we going to come back into or continue is probably a better way to say that our intimacy with Christ, will it continue after our spouse has departed?
Mhm. Yeah,
Should. If it's
yeah.
been at a time, it absolutely will. So we're firm believers that successful marriages come from successful seasons of being single. If
Mm.
you're fulfilled here in singleness, you will find fulfillment in and through and on the other side of your marriage because you found your source to begin with.
Right. Yeah, and that's the counsel I always give my kids. I still have some single ones. So,
Mhm.
what is your story, the two of you? It's so unique. And how much of it do you want to share? Because I feel like, as I goad you, hint, hint, wink, wink, a lot of your story it's really just like I said, it's about the journey, not about the end result.
Yeah. Well, I'll let Gary start because he kind of opened up the biblical box on this before I did.
Well, for myself, I recognized that desire early on. I had some relationships, some girlfriends in my teens, and then at at the age of 18, after a nasty breakup, I prayed my first prayer, and I asked God, I really want the one you have for me. So I did have some initial belief that He cared about this kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so what did I do? I went out and got myself another girlfriend. So, but that was me. I didn't know the difference between what he did and what I did. So it's very possible for us to have right desires and then run out and try to fulfill it for ourselves. You
Mhm.
mentioned something earlier about having a desire, and which is a good and right thing. But if you go back to the original love story of Adam and Eve, God looked at Adam and he said, it's not good for man to be alone. Now, I've heard a lot of people quote this verse and then run out and try to fulfill that need. But the second part of the verse said, I will make a helper suitable. So what does that tell us? That tells us that God said, I see your need, but I'm the one that's going to meet it, not you. So take your hands out of the candy dish and let me do my job. And let me give you singleness, just like he did Adam. He put Adam in the garden. All this signifies his singleness. He put him in the garden and he gave him something to do. He gave him a job. He gave him a job naming the animals. And so as he named the animals, now Adam looks at the animals and said, hey, I don't have a partner. So what happened? Did he go out and grab a monkey? Did he go out and grab a baboon? No, he let God do what he said. So he put him to sleep. When he put him to sleep, that meant he rested. He rested while God did all the work. And then when God finally had Eve, who brought Eve to Adam? But God himself. These are the principles of how he aligned this thing to always work. It's his job, not ours. So that's where we rest. So we rest in his singleness until he does his job. And he's always doing his job. It's not like that I don't have my spouse yet. That doesn't mean he isn't at work at all. He's continually at work. And so there's where we find our rest, and there's where we find the fulfillment of it, of what God said he was going to do, not what we do for ourselves. That's what I learned. I didn't grow up learning this. I didn't even learn this out of the church. I had to discover this and find it in the scriptures all for myself, that this is how he wants to do this.
I love that. It's so amazing when we find those aha moments in scripture where something pops off the page to us and we think, wait, I didn't learn that in church. What a concept. Hearing it straight from our God. Yeah, that's great. I think that I don't know that I've ever, of course, that makes sense, but I don't know that I've ever heard that. Adam didn't do a thing. He wasn't out trolling. Like he he just waited for God to bring him his wife. That's awesome.
And he rested.
And so if you also notice that God didn't make 12 women for Adam to choose one. He
Yeah,
made one.
thank you. That's a great point. Yeah.
So if God's involved, he only needs one. He
Mhm.
doesn't need a dozen or 2 dozen. He doesn't need a screen full of dating websites and dating applications, dating profiles, whatever they are these days. He
Mhm.
doesn't need that. He needs one. And so if he does it, he will always point you to one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
now,
have one single kid who won't even get on one of those sites. She says, when God brings me my husband, he's going to bring me my husband. I
Good
don't
for
know.
him.
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
yeah, and that pretty much put Gary on lock-in, that he was waiting for the one God had for him. I was on the other side of town. We both lived in the same town, never knew each other. And I had had I was the typical girl who was looking forward to Prince Charming. I'm, looking for the one that's going to slay all the dragons so he can have me just all to himself. And I held out for that. I wasn't living for the Lord, but I still had this very strong conviction that I was going to wait, not just for marriage, I was going to wait for love. So I was saving myself for love, as much as the peer pressure was there to give it up at any time, because according to my friends that I was hanging out with, it's just sex, no big deal. But I just couldn't do it. I wanted love in that process in my life. Then I had actually, girlfriend and I had made a trip to Memphis, Tennessee, where I had experienced a sexual violation of a rape. 30 days later, I found out that I was pregnant. So I had gone through the process with my parents. I will say, shout out to my dad, who interrupted my appointment for an abortion by saying, "We don't do that. Abortion's murder." It
Mhm.
completely just changed the course of the rest of our lives, because by him saying we don't do that, I knew I was no longer alone in the
Mhm.
circumstance I was in. From that point forward, it made a couple other decisions. To make a long story short, I did decide to keep my baby and be a single mom and raise her on my own. That set me up in a place where I needed God to be more real than he had ever been to me. And a full surrender of my life had happened at that point. And I wanted to guard and steward my daughter's innocence as much as I could. I wasn't interested in having a revolving door of men coming in and out, though I may have interest or not. For a little girl, the attachment of the heart could happen pretty quickly, and I believe create a lot of confusion for children. So I just decided, I'm like, Lord, I'm just going to ask you. I'm going to do the crazy things I heard other women do on Focus in the Family back in the day. And I'm going to ask him, much like your daughter, bring him to my door. I don't want to be caught up in all of the indecisions, in that I didn't make good choices with my life before you. So I'm just going to trust that you're going to make good decisions in my life moving forward. So that's at the point where I locked in, trusting God. I'd read the same Bible stories that Gary had, Adam and Eve, Isaac and Rebecca, Ruth and Boaz. And in all three of those stories, I saw God repeat his actions. In that the men were working and resting, and the women were prepared and presented. And so I just dug in. And at that point, I gave my singleness to God. And he actually took full advantage of that and allowed me to minister to other women to fall in love with Jesus before they fell in love with the one God had for them. And so that's how I wrote out my singleness before we
So
even.
let me stop you there because I haven't gotten to that part of the book.
Okay.
So what you're saying is you were a role model for single women before you even met Gary
Yes.
because you were living out your faith in the wait,
Mhm.
which I think is fantastic. And the Lord always rewards that every time. So you had every assurance that one day it would be your day.
Yeah, it took me a while to get to the assurance because there was a lot of junk that had to come off of my mindset. But there did come a day where I knew that I knew that I knew it was on the calendar and I could rest. And it's not that I didn't have times throughout, throughout those years of waiting that I didn't doubt. Everybody doubts,
Hmm.
but God still answers that with Himself, with His promises, with His word. We all have to exercise the faith that we've been given.
So what I heard Gary say was he adopted that Adam mentality where he was just waiting and he knew that the Lord would bring him a wife. And then backing up, now I understand what you're saying because you said you were preparing yourself and readying yourself, but really what you mean by that is it was in the wait. So while you were waiting, you were busy ministering to others and doing the Lord's work, which is the best place to be when you're in a wait because he keeps you so busy you don't think about anything else. So the timing must have been great. So how did that work out?
Well, I was going to say one thing that we didn't bring up is that Gary, in his wrestling with all of this, had heard from the Lord that there would be a wife for him, but it wasn't going to be in the current season. I also had a word from the Lord that there would be a man who hears his voice. So we did our faith, we committed to God's ways, and then He spoke something specific to each one of us. So that was one of those things where we got to at least in those times of doubt go back and said, but God, you said, but you said, and then He would continue to water those with experiences with Him, with truth with Him. He would test it with other opportunities that might come in front of us and how we're going to respond with faith or not. So I'm sorry, I kind of did I kind of went
Well,
around
I
the
was
track.
just wondering, do you think it's important to always remind the Lord of his promises? I mean, I interviewed this one gal. I mean, she is just fantastic. Her name is Natalie. And her mom on her wedding day prayed a blessing over her, be fruitful and multiply. She's been on the show. You should look her up. She's amazing. And then come to find out, she went through this whole ordeal where she had a tumor and she was told that she had to have a hysterectomy, but she held out to God's promise that he would give her a child and went through this whole time where honestly her faith was so crazy and such an example for the rest of us because she refused, even though she was in pain and couldn't drive and couldn't get out of bed and the tumor was growing and there was no way she was ever going to get pregnant. I mean, she really believed it. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. Um, and so I wonder to what degree do we sit back? This is more, I don't know, suppose more rhetorical than a question I expect you to answer, but I wonder to what degree do we sit back and let things happen in the wait or kind of not beg the Lord. Begging is not, I think it's a position of assurance, right? Where you're constantly reminding him, hey, remember what you said. So
I would say for myself personally, I don't see myself alone. So I don't see it so much as I'm reminding God what He said. I'm reminding myself
yeah, that's
what
a good point.
no, you said, and it's me reassuring myself with His words that this is what you said. I know this is what you said. You said this, and it just helps you dig in even deeper back to what He said. Keeps you out of trouble, doesn't it?
Kept you out of
It
trouble.
kept me out of trouble.
Well, I think, yeah, it's an interesting time to have this interview and to have met through our mutual friend Missy and to have Missy reached out to me and said, hey, you need to have them on the show because it's an interesting time for me as I think about all the promises made in this specific regard and all the things that I thought I heard, but it
Yeah.
turns out, I don't know, did I hear them and then everything just went south? Or, I mean, people have free will. So then you always have to consider that part of it. But I do think what I've heard him say to me specifically, and I think to everyone who has a heart for this, um, he says, I wouldn't have told you to find a partner and be fruitful and multiply in life if I didn't anticipate and plan for you each to go through life with somebody that will help you and to stand by your side. And so then, you throw in these ideas of like romance. So what's that like? Because I know that some of your writings bring that word in. So tell me a little bit more about that and what your perspective is on romance.
Romance is a gift, but it says in the Song of Solomon three different times not to awaken it until it's right time. So we get into trouble when we want to awaken it before it's time or with the wrong person. So as it comes as a gift, it will always be intended to be for our own good. It's enjoyable, of course it is, but it's not what we live our lives for. It's not the end all. So the world will tell you that you are no one until you have romance. Look at all of our sitcoms, look at our movies, they glorify romance. Why do they do that? I believe they do that because they are trying to fill the hole that the creator was meant to fill in their lives. And the next best thing is this romantic thing, and they've blown it out of perspective where it's supposed to be something that it was never meant to be. It's supposed to be the pinnacle of life. It's supposed to be what fills them to the brink. And we know that, of course, many of your listeners will know that that's God Himself. That's Jesus. So when the gift of romance is given, it's a beautiful asset. It's a beautiful thing to add to your life. It's a beautiful thing to add to the purpose of your life, but it's not the central theme. Never was supposed to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a very powerful adhesive element to the human life is romance. And I took that to heart way early, to not awaken it before it was time, understanding the power of it, and then the casualties that happen when we don't heed that wisdom. It's pretty brutal. And I think as I look at it more and more, I understand the emotional breaking up that's happening in the soul as we adhere and we tear away and we adhere and we tear away. But I get more concerned about the will of a person getting worn out from that activity.
Hmm. It's a
The
good point.
element, yeah,
Right. Yeah.
the element of faith, because when you're moving into a relationship outside of revelation, you move into a relationship romantically. There is a part of your will that has now submitted to a hope, or we could say a faith, that this is going to turn out well. We're all moving into those relationships with these high hopes and expectations. Then there is that element of starting to compromise. And how can I fit into this person better? Not that I already fit them, right? So I'm already compromising when I'm trying to fit in. The more we repeat that pattern, I believe the trigger that helps us have faith wears out. And it's harder every single time to have faith when God speaks a word, because we've added a history of attempted failures on our own part. So even that gets guarded when you are not awakening love before it's time. I joked with one of our pastors a couple weeks ago, right when we released Violets in the Snow, that this love story does not read like the typical love story. They said it doesn't start out with boy sees girl and boy chases girl and boy gets girl. It's not that conventional love story. It's like the iceberg picture where there was all kinds of quote unquote romance happening in relationship with God, not with flowers and chocolate, but with intimate knowing of one another happening underneath the water of the waiting. So our book is probably, I don't know, 2/3 underwater before the romance sprouts for the two of us. And I believe what sets our love story apart is the respect that we had for one another from the get-go, in that the same spirit that dwells in this man dwells in me, dwells in you. I had heard from the Lord after we were friends, I think about 9 months, that this is who God had for me. And I'd been waiting decades to hear the Lord say that. And as much as I wanted to run up and tell him what I thought I heard the Lord say, I knew better. I knew that it sets a precedent. I wanted him to be the one to take the lead. God gave me instruction. Let him take the lead. Let him define the relationship. So there was no awakening romance. There was friendship. And I think our mutual friend, Carolyn, she said something last week. She said, if you're not marrying your best friend, you're marrying the wrong person. And I
Exactly. Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
agree 100%. So we cherished friendship. And it was a bunch of friendships that took place before we ever met each other that we learned to honor. We learned all the one anothering that was necessary. We didn't learn romance with these people. We just learned how to honor and love one another until God brought revelation. When I got revelation, I also got instruction. And we remained friends for 4 years until he got revelation. And I'll say once he got the revelation, it was only 4 days before he took the lead and he presented his revelation that I understood. I finally get to flirt with him. Romance started under the covering of an engagement. It didn't start before engagement. It came under the covering. But the knowledge of who he was as a man and who he was as a Christian man was thick and wide and totally trustworthy. And hopefully that was the same for you.
I'm still trying to figure that out. Romance is easy. It
I love
comes, we don't have to work at it. What Kim said is the hard part.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Just be
so,
friends. Yeah. The
and so
friendship is such a good thing. Sorry. Yeah.
but when he does reveal, and that's what that's what we teach, that this is all about God revealing, and he will do that. It's not about finding, it's about him revealing. And when he does that, the romance is easy. It's natural, it's easy. Uh, all the hard work, all the plowing is done in the singleness before. So
Well, and that's what I wanted to get to because I started to offer, I'll say this first, going back just a little bit, is one of my daughters was just very good friends with her husband for a long while. And then one day I get a text and she's telling me, well, he wants to be more than friends. And I said, oh my gosh. I mean, you're not going to wreck the friendship, are you? You know, how do you feel? She's, well, I don't know. I think I feel the same way. And they're married now and have 4 kids. They've been married for, well, since 2012. So for a little while. And it's just a beautiful thing. I do want to get to the underwater part and what you were just kind of alluding to, Gary, because it wasn't just the underwater part that you did things differently than maybe is done traditionally. And I hear what you say about waiting for the engagement to begin, the romance part of it. I also know that there's courting that can happen that may look a little different for people. But the part that I want to get to with the underwater was the way that, and if you could set us up with all the ways that God was working to organize behind the scenes. So that's what I really liked about the perspective, the different chapters, each of you giving your details about what's going on at the time. And we, as the reader, we're seeing it all sync up, even though you weren't seeing it sync up. So, what was that like? Can you tell me about, pardon me?
I
I
said, I'm
didn't,
glad it happened for you that you as the reader you're watching it all sync up, knowing that we have no idea what's going on. So I
right.
feel like a win right there.
Yeah.
wow, where do I start with this one? Um, I respected Kim. I respected our friendship. The friendship grew. We didn't date in a traditional manner. We did things together on occasion, sometimes in groups, occasionally just the two of us, but we never opened the can of romance. It was always platonic. It was always with respect. And as this friendship grew, and it did grow, um, toward the end of the 4 years she was speaking of, I started noticing changes in me, like I was watching it happen. I really I tried to resist it, to be honest, because I didn't think that I didn't think this was for real. I can't control this. I'm not in control of myself. I didn't understand it. And it was maybe three different occasions that I started to think things and feel things concerning Kim that I had never done before. And I thought, this is devil. This is evil. And I tried to use warfare. I'm resisting this. I'm resisting this, but it never went away. So two things, that never went away and Kim never went away. So, being a friend, friendships drift in and out of your life all the time. But she never went away. And so it was finally at a rock show that we go see a lot of rock shows together, and we were at a rock show and at a club, a very large club, 1,500 people maybe, lots of drunk people around us. Someone elbowed me in my ribs, and I did, I had felt people press up against me the whole night, and at this point, someone had elbowed me in my ribs, and it was really, really kind of painful. I thought, who is this idiot? And I turned around to look, and I saw no one. And what I did see was Kim, and she was looking up at me, and she was smiling, like she always does, and very vivid, very clear. The voice, the inner voice that said, "This is your wife." He said, "No one will love her. No one will love you like she will."
Oh,
That was it. That was the revelation. You could have hit me in the head with a hammer, and that's what changed everything. So 3 days later, 4 days later, whatever it was, is when I approached her and told her what had happened to me.
Yeah.
So then the romance started after that.
And I think part of the underwater that you even were referring to is there were so many things once we came together as an engaged couple start popping off of all of these chance opportunities for us to meet years and years before we ever met. One of the first ones was to find out when I first met Gary. His last name was super familiar to me. I went researching and I found a girl that I went to high school with. And I'm like, why aren't we friends? So I friend her on Facebook, and I'm going through her pictures casually, and there's Gary sitting right next to her. And all of a sudden it dawns on me, it's Tina, is his sister. This is Tina's brother. That means when Tina and I graduated high school, Gary was in the audience.
wow.
So literally at my high school graduation. That was the first kickoff to how is it that we were in the same space and didn't know the other one existed. And then we live in the same city. Therefore, there are times when we were at the same place at the same time, still not meeting each other, not knowing each other. We literally had a mutual friend who would continually tell me about this guy who wrote a book called God of the Romantic, which is what it's called now. And she said, he believes God brings people together. She goes, you should read his book. And we were one friend away from each other for probably, I would say that went on for a couple of years. And I didn't actually read Gary's book until my pastor threw it in my lap after God brought him to my door, which was my church door. So I helped plant a church in our hometown. So God literally had me plant a church so Gary could show up. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Okay, so hold up. I did not know, okay, that maybe I haven't gotten to this part yet. Gary, you also were working kind of in this ministry before the Lord had answered your prayer. So what I'm hearing is you wrote that book prior to meeting Kim. That is fantastic. That is
So
so wild.
between us, we have four books. The latest one is the one that you are reading now, Violets in the Snow. So Kim has a book that she's written. It's a devotional that's meant to read one a week. It's 52 weeks of devotionals. It's 9 miles thick, and it has its own wheels to carry. So my book, God of the Romantic, is 25 years old. I wrote this book and had this ministry myself, and I taught people, I spoke, I shared this book, I sold some books, and I was doing this before I met Kim. So this is setting us up, and she was doing it on her own, especially for young women. Also teaching this kind of thing for young women before I met her. So we were both flowing and working in this area before we met each other.
That's really beautiful. What a love story. Why did you write this book at the age of 25? Or not at the age of 25, but 25 years ago? What prompted you to write this book?
So
Wait, I cut out, or you cut out while I was talking. What'd you say?
I'm only 25 now,
I was
so
gonna say, I knew there was a punchline. I could tell from all the little, yeah, 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 you're hard. I know
okay.
you are. Okay, so literally,
Which
why?
um, I was so frustrated with what I'd learned from the culture. I was so frustrated with what I'd learned from the American church, which was nothing but a little bit more of a moral version of what was in the world. Go out and find someone, make it work. When God's pleased with what you like, he'll stamp his approval on it and you'll be on your merry way. Well, no, there's a whole lot more to it than that.
Mhm.
So, um, in my frustration, I began to look through the scriptures themselves, and I just said, God, I want to know how you do this. I'm tired of trying. I'm worn out. I'm exhausted with trying to do this myself. I want to know how you always meant this to work. And as a whole, the church had no answer. So I forgot it all. I wiped the slate clean and I started digging through the scriptures. And I did this for years. And I would get little pieces of revelation. I would write them down. I filled about 3 or 4 notebooks full of notes of what I was learning. I had a really good friend, and she was helping me with an outline for a Bible study that I was doing. And she said, "You need to write a book." And it was through that process that when I started, I came to realize that all the things that I was learning wasn't just for me because I was doing it for my own sanity to begin with. And I was then it came to me that this isn't just for me, it's for others as well. So that's where the first book came from. So like I said, it's about 25 years old now, the original version of it. It's changed a lot. There have been some additions, some takeaways, but the original book is about 25 years old. So wait, all this time after being married, after moving to Nashville, it finally sees the light of day and gets published.
So my next question then is, and this is really how long have you been married, or how long did the Lord ask you to wait?
Are you ready for this? I prayed my first prayer when I was 18 years old,
Mhm.
and I got married at 56. I waited 38 years.
Wow.
Got to finally bring the right person. And
Mhm.
it, and now I was kind of an idiot at the beginning, so I had to learn all
Mhm.
this before that happened. And Kim's got a really long wait as well. Our wait wasn't just for us, it was for others. And we now know that.
Mhm.
And so that's where, what we
Yeah.
do, it's our ministry, it's what we do. It's um so yeah, the wait was very long.
God doesn't tell you ahead of time how long you're going to wait. Well, if he does, I would be surprised. But he uses the promise to draw you in, but he doesn't tell you how long it's going to take because the pressure of encountering the unknown exposes the fault lines in our faith. He wants the whole person to receive. So he purposes those time frames um, for the relationship in favor of the relationship between you and him. After so many years, you do start to question, like, this is the easiest thing in the world. People go out and get dates, get engaged, and get married so easy. I've heard you do it for other people so much quicker than it's happening for me. Why am I waiting? Why this long? When those questions start to pop up, you get an understanding. This isn't just about you. the story that he's writing is on behalf of other people so that they can feed and get refreshed and find hope and learn who he is. And two things he spoke to me before I even met Gary in my own waiting time was that he was writing a love story that would make people want to wait, not have to wait, which is a slave mentality, but want to wait as though they would desire to wait like this in order to get this kind of experience of a love story with him. The other thing he spoke to me was that he was writing a story to stir the holy emotions of a younger generation to actually help turn the moral compass of that generation. At that point, it's like, oh, it's still happening, but it's less about me and more about what he's wanting to do for future generations. So what do? You wait a little longer. And everybody wants Abraham's story. Very few people want the wait. And if God would have told us ahead of time, it's going to take 26 years, 30 some years, you would have said no, right? You would have gone and made it happen, but that's not who he is. He's the one who knows best, and he's a perfect leader at it.
And we realize that most people aren't going to have to wait as long as we did.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I'm glad they don't.
Yeah.
So I could tell you stories. I know of a very famous person that had some kind of a revelation that God wanted to match them. And so he prayed for his wife, who his wife was. He prayed for her right then and there. He was in a hotel and he went down into the lobby and met his wife 30 minutes later.
That's hilarious. Well, I just keep thinking when you're talking about the weight, and I think about younger generations and having raised my own kids, there's nothing worse than being with the wrong person. You know, it's so much better to be lonely and to have, like you've put it, the opportunity to spend time with the Lord and to get to know yourself and all of the things. And I think when you're younger, you just feel this, there's pressure to get married. I hear a lot about biological clocks, all of the things, instead of just trusting the process. And then we have, I think for a lot of people, the complication of divorces that really entered into something they thought that the Lord was all about. And then it turned out that it wasn't what they thought it was. And navigating, okay, so Lord, this is what you said. Well, wait a minute. I don't understand why did this happen. I understand you use everything. I can see that everything the enemy intends to harm, the Lord intends for good. So it's very complicated, right? But the thesis statement in all of this is just trusting the Lord, enjoying your friendship with Him first and foremost, and then delighting in seeing what He's doing and being okay with the wait. I mean, I just think when you guys were talking about the wait too, the other thing I thought of is I know there's somebody watching at this going, well, I don't want to wait that long. I'm not going to wait that long. Trust me, my friend. You don't want to get with the wrong person. You don't want to be with the person that God didn't intend you to be with. So
Right.
that is extremely encouraging. And like I said earlier, I just feel like the beauty of seeing the weight and what God is doing in the process. And now, see, I didn't even know that you were in the ministries that you were, that you, Gary, had written this book, and you, Kim, had this incredible ministry, all the while testifying to the weight and what it looked like on the other side of it. That's terrific.
Yeah. And I would say that the relationship that's happening with the Lord in the midst of all that. I know you haven't read the end of the book. It's the best because of the redemption that happened after the violation and that experience. The healing process, it didn't come in a moment. It didn't come in a prayer at the altar or in a healing room type of environment. It came in relationship with Jesus.
Mhm.
It was a process that unfolded as I grew, as my daughter was growing, as I was meeting challenges of doing the right thing. You can still do the right thing and it still be hard.
Mhm.
And through all of that, Gary and I get married and we schedule our honeymoon And part of our honeymoon was to do a loop through Memphis, which is where the violation happened. And I'd always was curious in the back of my mind how I would experience or how I'd respond or react if I were to ever enter into that same area where things took off in a bad direction for me. And that's the end of the book. I won't give all the details, but the redemption experience that we had in that city broke me because I understood he not only, I had no trigger, zero, complete healing is possible, zero triggers. And then I got to encounter the pride of a father over his children who chose to trust him, even if it took 30 some years to do it.
Oh, where's the Kleenex? Oh,
Um,
I don't have
yeah.
it on my desk. Well, so did you, that's one of the things I did wonder in starting to read it because you alluded to that in the beginning. Did you choose Memphis for that reason, or was it just an aha moment when you were there?
No, we did not choose it for that reason at all. We
Wow.
actually we're in Illinois, but we decided on New Orleans. That's where we wanted to spend our honeymoon. And I thought, I think I was wanting to go to Colorado or something. But as soon as he said that, I go, funny you should say that because I get Memphis on my mind. So now it kind of makes sense that we should head in that direction. In my mind, we spent our first night in Memphis on the way down. To me, it was like, yay, Memphis is great,
Mhm.
right? I'm having that experience personally going, this is triumphant. Yay, this is fun.
She still has a crush on Elvis.
That might be part of it
Yeah.
too.
Well, that's kind of understandable.
We do our honeymoon in New Orleans. It was coming back that had the most incredible, unexpected event in it. Nobody could have planned for. And I hope that reads through the whole book. There's so much that, like you said, happening behind the scenes that we did not see what God was mapping together until we got there. And even to this day, there's still things that pop up and we're like, you were there, I was there. Yeah, all these things. How did we not meet any sooner?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's amazing how our God puts all of it together. It always is so mind-blowing if you just stop down and think about all of the people he's ministering to, all the ways that he's talking, all the intricacies of their lives and the details that he's ironing out. And he does this millions upon millions upon millions upon millions. And it's so crazy to think about. In terms of even just the title of your book, Violets. I know you talk about that and all of the ways. I mean, it's very intentional, violets in the snow, because you think, oh, violets in the snow, what's all of that about? So yeah, everybody's gonna have to read it. And I like the timepiece on the front too. So nice.
Means all about it. We had a very fun experience. We actually got to marry somebody. We married 2 or 3 months, and we got to marry somebody shortly after we got married.
Oh.
But we started to see the multifaceted parts of our story and how they would encourage other people. So there was a man, a Marine, that had attended this wedding, and we start to tell him a little bit of our story. He himself was single, hoping that was going to change. And in the midst of the story, we tell him Gary's experience, where he received his revelation. It was at a rock concert, with a band that you just like, God would not do anything in this environment, right? But when he heard that God met him in that type of environment and revealed his wife, he immediately shot up and he's like, I knew it. I knew God could do things like that. So people who are like, they're looking at this and they're going, well, that's nice and cute for you. But when they realize where Gary got his revelation, they're like, you could even meet me there. So the things that he has painted into this love story has been a real joy for us to see what pops up for different people.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm sure writing it really made a difference too when you sit down with him and he's saying, include this, and you're thinking, really? Should I include that? Yeah, include it. Okay, well then you include it, and then all of a sudden you realize why it's included. I've had moments like that with him too, where it's such a pleasure to allow him to do his thing. It's just truly amazing. But
Let me throw in real quick. You mentioned the timepiece. if you notice the timing on that pocket watch, tell me
Mhm.
what time it says.
It says 3:30. No, it says, I'm sorry, let me look at it. Ooh, it says 2:34,
Try
right?
again.
Gosh, you guys. You know what this I do know, I'm wearing glasses that aren't okay, so it is literally 2:30, 34. No?
Three.
Read what?
3:34, not 2:34.
But look, it looks like two.
It's after the two. It's on its way to being 3 o'clock.
It's on
Oh,
its way to being 3 o'clock.
Wow.
Yay! I mean, I haven't like the whole time. So I have, okay, I'll just say it. This is so off key, but I have the smallest bridge here on my nose. I can never, no matter what glasses I get, I cannot keep them up. So the whole time they're falling down and everything's blurry. And so I thought, oh my gosh, am I not seeing? Okay, so what time should it be? That's a better question.
I'm
yeah,
going to have to take a look at
yeah,
that,
they're
man.
graphic artists.
Jeez
We
Louise.
went over that a
No,
few times.
don't buy the book. Don't
No.
buy the book.
It's perfect. Hey, there's a reason. We all need to go look up 234. Yeah,
Uh,
we need to look at that.
It's supposed to be 3:34. So here's the deal real quick. I won't take long. Kim had these experiences where she would be looking at the clock and it would say 3:33. She would look at a license plate. She would see a receipt. Everywhere she looked, she was seeing the number 3:33. And so she finally asked God, "What in the world does this mean?" And you looked up the verse.
Yeah, Jeremiah 33:3, call upon me and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things that you've never seen or heard before. He's going to open mysteries. And that kind of kept pulse for me through my wait. So anytime I would see 3:33 or just 33, it was like a checkpoint for me knowing that I was on track.
So we we go through what we go through the 4 years of friendship, and then at the rock show I get a revelation. This happened on a Thursday night, and so now I don't know what to do with this. I'm asking God, how do I move forward with this thing? Because it's always been by faith. It's nothing like the world, which the sitcoms and movies where they all tell you everyone's flowers and roses. You just see who you like and chase them. How do I do this now? So I waited for him to answer. And so when he did, he answered me on a Sunday morning. And so I thought, well, it's just time to present. It's time to tell her what happened. So the church that we were at the time met at 6 o'clock on Sunday nights. And so she was living out of town with her father temporarily. And so I texted her and I asked her, can you meet me at my house at 3 o'clock? So before church. And wouldn't tell her why. And so she showed up at 3 at my house. And so we got into my car and we drove to a park. This little park is north of town. Took us about 15 minutes. We went to a park bench and we sat down. She has no idea what's going on. And so we make some silly comments about squirrels. We have fat squirrels in Illinois because there's lots of corn, and the squirrels are red and they're very fat. And they chase each other because they weigh too much. So people were playing tennis next to us, just a bunch of stupid small talk. Finally, I said, well, it's time to do this. And so I told her that Jesus messed me up. I'm going to mess you up now. And I told her that he had revealed you're the one and stuff. And she was completely silent, said nothing. And I thought, did I scare her? What's wrong? And nevertheless, she was just catching up on what took place. And we got engaged just right then and right there. As we were leaving, not thinking much about it, it hit me. Let's do the math. So I did the math and I went back forward. She met me at 3. We drove to the park. We had small talk. The proposal happened at 3:34 on Sunday afternoon.
Which we had to intercept. 3:34 was when I was
Three.
asking God when he was going to change the subject. Like, I'm tired of waiting. When are we going to change the subject of my singleness? And I kept seeing the number 34. And that was pointing me back to Song of Solomon 3, 3, and 4 about seeing the one that she loves. And I'm like, you're getting ready to change the topic. This is going to happen. So when we get to the park and it's 3:34, it's no longer 3:33 for me. It's 3:34. We've changed the subject. my love life is complete and this waiting is complete for my love. So that's the reference to the timepiece
I
that
love
we're.
that. I see that a lot, a lot, a lot. And
Mhm.
ask Carolyn because we're always screenshotting our phone and sending it to each other because the same time every day, every day, every day, the Lord's making a point. And I'll say this real fast, and it really doesn't have anything to do with other than confirming your time thing. I was at my daughter's house, and she's about 3 hours from here. She's away at university, my youngest. And I was over there one day and I spent the night and I was going to leave and we got back from church. It was a Sunday and I walked in and I realized we had missed when we walked out to church that the power had gone out and on her stove it said 3:33. And I just had chills. I just had chills. I said, "Okay, God froze the time at 3:33. What is going on?" He's making a point. Now, that just seems so random and I think she looked at me like, "Okay, mom, whatever." So then we did some other things. And then it was time for me to leave. And we were arguing about how long it would take me to get home. And I said, no, wait a minute. When I leave, I'll let you know what time it is. And then we can because I had come down the stairs and I was at my vehicle and I was ready to leave. And I thought, I'm just going to screenshot and send her a screenshot, let her know what time I'm leaving. And I take a screenshot and it's 3:33. And I'm thinking, okay, what are you doing, Lord? Something. I mean, I just felt everything felt so different. I felt an angelic host around me. So I go get on the highway. She goes to K-State. So it's you have to traverse another highway to get to the main highway, I-70, through the Flint Hills. And I'm driving down the road and a car has just overturned and it's on its top. And I just knew that I knew this is what the 3:33 is about. This is letting me know I'm activated and I need to get out of the vehicle and I need to go help. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't even think about it later. I mean, I just left my stuff in the car and just started running to see what I could do to help. Long story short, some other people came in. We were able to help this woman who was upside down and trapped in her vehicle. It wasn't until I was leaving and I realized a number of things like, oh gosh, we're out in the Flint Hills and up on the side where there's very tall grass. Do I have my keys? Do I have my wallet? I had actually a rental car at the time, so I had the old-fashioned key, and I thought, oh no, what if I'm stuck out here? No, I was fine. I get in the car, and I thought, what just happened? And as I passed the exit sign said 3:33.
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's so cool when you're aware, when you know that you know. It's not a coincidence and it's not random. You just knew. You just knew in that moment and you're absolutely correct. Just like I had no reason for thinking just because the clock stopped. Like, but it all turned out to be true because we're given that knowledge too in the Holy Spirit.
My daughter and I used to do the same thing. We would snap pictures of 33 or 3:33 and
Mhm.
text them back to each other. That was our first tattoo was for my daughter and I. She turned 21 and I was trying to top the gift that she had gotten from her boyfriend at the time. And it was like, I do to impress you. So we decided we went and got matching tattoos with Jeremiah 33:3. So, and it continues to mark our lives. It just continues to be that impression of call upon me. I'm
Mhm.
going to answer you and show you something that you hadn't seen before. So it's very relational.
Yeah, I love it. So how old is your daughter now?
She just turned 33.
Why
I
did
know.
I ask? That's what I'm talking about. I love it. I love it. I love it. That's so
Married
great.
next door. She didn't have to date to find him. They were friends. She was friends with his sister, and then she became friends with him. And so she didn't have to date around. He was the only one that she's ever been with, and they now have three beautiful boys. So
There's that number three again. Gotta love it. Yeah. All right, you two. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today. What an encouragement you are. What a beautiful story you have. And everyone needs to get out and read it because it's so fun. And then you can know what violets in the snow means too.
yeah, absolutely. GodofTheRomantic.com. You'll see all the books are going to be available there, and they have links to Amazon, so you can purchase there. If anybody wants just a seed of faith, we have, if you go to GodofTheRomantic.com/free, just free, it's going to bring up, excuse me, a document of the word where you can get your faith to believe that God has one for you. So it's
Cool.
just a source for you to put on your refrigerator, your mirror, whatever, to stay in faith, believing that He is the one who wants to make the gift and present it.
Absolutely. And you said that's godoftheromantic.com/free.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. 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 I'll try to remember to have that in the show
Yeah,
notes. It's a
yeah.
pleasure seeing you face to face today. I know it was fun talking on the phone and hearing about you, and it was very nice to meet you, Gary.
Yes, nice to meet you.
We had the I met Missy at the state capitol for the mamas thing. I can't remember the exact term. But it was a prayer in front of the state capitol. And I gave my testimony about my daughter Andy. I had like 90 seconds. And so I got to the microphone and I gave my testimony, and Missy was the one person behind me. So we had a quick exchange, never seen her before. Then we get invited to a dinner for married couples, and her and Mark are there. And she's like,
Wow.
all right, this is not coincidence. And she finds out I'm an author and she's a writing coach. And so it's just been really fun to be able to connect with her, and then all kind of other things seem to open up. So great to get to meet you and connect.
You're connected now to a really great group of people. There's such a blessing. All of my sisters in Christ down in the Nashville area. Oh, I feel so loved. See, the Lord, He just shows me ways that He loves me all the time. It's amazing. So, anyway, thank you again for coming on Color Speak today, and thank you everyone for listening. And I hope that your world is filled with all kinds of wonderful Holy Spirit moments, which means lots of color. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Bye.